we've got a couple of Australian stories. Actually, I had another Australian story as well that I was going to share, but we'll leave it for another time. Dr. Charlie Teo, a neurosurgeon that has been found guilty of unsatisfactory professional conduct. So, a little bit of background around this story. Dr. Charlie Teo is a world-renowned, as they keep reporting him, a world-renowned neurosurgeon that tends to work on the unworkable, if that's to put it politely. He has some cutting edge technologies that he has to share. The way he approaches neurosurgery, he likes to take on those cases that have been told there's no chance for them anywhere else, and he takes on those cases. From all reports I could see, he seems to be, pretty good at what he does, and there's a lot of good reports around him. However, he's recently been banned for inappropriate behavior, professional inappropriate behavior, where he has been accused and found guilty of not laying out the risks of a surgery appropriately, over promising, I suppose, and some people did not survive the surgeries, and therefore they sued, and now he's lost his ability to practice here without a surgeon. But apparently, I don't know, it's all of our articles are all below. We link everything, all the things that we're looking at. We link them down below in description. So go and check out the stories. Dr. Rod, I actually found it quite interesting that he's now been banned from practice. Actually, no, he hasn't. He can still operate, but he needs another surgeon to sign off on it. But apparently he had to get that anyway. So now there's some, obviously there's some insurance issues and stuff like that, and no hospital will touch him because he's, toxic name around him or whatever. What's your take on this whole story?
Right. Well, my PhD is in economics, so I don't have any technical expertise, but this story has been around for a little while now.
Yeah.
As you correctly stated, Dr. Charlie Teo is known around the world. He does undertake very risky brain surgery, and he has been known to operate on patients who have been told that their condition is inoperable. And he's had a degree of success. He specialises, as I understand it, in keyhole surgery, and people have turned to him when they have basically been told you've got no hope, you've basically got to go home and die. Now, in this, what brought all this to a head was that there were the families of two patients now deceased, laid official complaints against him, partly on the grounds that, in their view, the risks weren't fully explained, but also my understanding is it had a lot to do with his bedside manner as well, the way in which he dealt in particular with the families of those deceased patients. Now, he's actually said that he's kind of accepted. Basically what he said is, yep, I accept the charge against me that my manner hasn't always been appropriate. He basically said, look, I don't agree with some of the fine points that were made, but look, the overall issue of my manner, yep, I accept that. He is charismatic. He's very extroverted, charismatic. Some would say egotistical, and he may well be. Yep. He certainly has a big ego.
Yeah. But somewhat warranted, though.
He has.
I think that's what I say sometimes when, it's a double-edged sword. To be able to do surgeries you gotta have an ego. You gotta have some confidence, about you. And then to do surgery on the brain, even more so. And then to do surgeries that other people say are impossible. Well, you want that person to have a lot of confidence about them, wouldn't you?
Well, confidence with competence. I'd
Yes.
want to see some evidence of competence. But look, I've heard long interviews with him long before this ban, if you like, was formalised. Look, he hasn't lost his licence to practice.
Yeah.
He can practice in any hospital in Australia, but he does have to have that level of supervision, and someone's got to sign off on his operations. And as you correctly say, my understanding is that no private hospital in Australia will actually allow him to operate. So essentially that means he can't operate in Australia. This so-called ban runs, I think, for about 15 years. It was initially proposed to run for something like 20 years, but what's 5 years? So he can still operate in some overseas jurisdictions, and people are going overseas to receive operations from him. So look, he's no doubt a difficult person to manage, but these formal complaints are, I guess, in a sense, offset by the testimony of many people who believe that without Charlie Teo, they or their family members wouldn't be alive today. And I've heard long interviews with people who would make that claim, and almost every one of them actually compliment him on what you might call his bedside manner. And they do say he explained the risks. And most people went to him already knowing that they could die on the operating table because they'd been told that they couldn't be operated on.
Yeah.
And there are some who seem to be doing quite well many years after their surgery. So, I mean, it's a very complex issue. We want the medical authorities to police medicine well. We want our neurosurgeons and other specialists to be competent, and we want them to have a good manner with people. But like everybody else, they get tired. Do we what?
Do we like? Is
well. Listen,
I kind of argue that point of like, well, we need our doctors to be good with people. Do we really? Like, is that going to eliminate if there's a doctor that is really good at what they do, surgery? Why do they have to be a performer as well? Do you know what I mean? Like, why do they have to?
Well, because for the psychological welfare of the patients, I think.
Then get someone else to do it.
I'm not following your line of argument.
I'm kind of saying that why would you discredit someone who is obviously this doctor is incredibly gifted at what he does. Why would you discredit him from being amazing at what he does just because he happens to be bad at talking to people? Like, well, get a nurse or get an assistant to talk to people.
That on its own is not the reason why he was disciplined, right? So there's a constellation of reasons. Now, he hasn't been charged with causing the death of any of his patients. As far as I know, that's never been the issue. What's at stake is what people allege is that he doesn't inform people fully about the risks, and he can be pretty brusque and rude to people. Well, that doesn't help your psychological situation, and certainly if you're a relative of someone who's died following an operation, it's not going to help their own mental health. So I think there is a case to be made that medical professionals in general should have they should have pretty highly developed empathy skills, and he admits that there are cases where it wasn't. But in one of the long interviews I heard, he also says, you get tired sometimes. This is only a real issue, I think, if it's a repeated pattern, if you like, it becomes habitual. And I've got no idea whether Charlie Teo's like that or not. But his kind of personality, I think, would lend him to being a little bit impatient, and that could come across. So yeah, and look, it's very difficult for us to judge from afar, but it's very, very clear that many of the people on whom he's operated absolutely love this guy and credit him with saving their lives. And there was, some of his patients have essentially been told, look, you can expect to live for a year or maybe 2 years, and then you're just going to die. Well, you know what? Even at my age, I reckon I'd probably have a risky operation
Yes.
to give me a few more years, even if I knew there was a high risk that I might die on the table. And I suppose, if my surgeon was a little bit gruff, I can laugh that off anyway. But everybody's different. Everybody's different. I think we should have some concern for Charlie Teo himself. This is obviously a significant blow to him. And look, in listening to him and just listening to the intonation in his voice, I've seen him a few times on television, but most of the time I've listened to audio interviews. I think this is a guy who genuinely cares.
Yes.
In that sense, he's highly professional.
Yeah.
But medicos in general, they don't like colleagues taking big risks. He takes risks. He is a risk taker. There's no doubt about it. He takes on operations that other surgeons simply will not risk.
Yeah.
And he's had some spectacular successes. And so I think the real question is, to what extent do we want to develop a medical profession that is highly risk averse? That to me is and this is an issue for leaders in many areas, in the law, in the legislators, those who are involved in dealing with regulation. What will be the impact on a profession if we shift the degree of risk averseness such that people become more risk averse?
Yeah.
What are we only going to perform an operation where there's absolutely where there's always a risk? Anyone goes under anaesthetic, there's always a risk. When anybody is on an operating table, even for a minor operation, there's always some risk. A small operation could precipitate a heart attack or something like that. But let's say well, we're not going to do anything that's got less than a very remote chance of causing death. Then a lot of people who otherwise might be saved are not going to be saved.
Yeah.
So if in saving 1,000 people, there's actually 120 who die, you got to think, is that a better outcome?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to tell you whether it is or not. I think we have to think through that issue. So, and as leaders, we set the risk appetite for our organisations.
Yeah.
If we're on a board, that's one of the jobs we actually have to do. Directors of a company, for example, if they don't, they should. They have to set the risk appetite for the organisation. What degree of risk are we prepared to accept in our operation?
Yeah.
And that's going to depend. That then will influence your whole risk management framework, the systems you put in place, the kinds of reporting you put in place. It'll affect the level of insurance that you buy.
Yep.
Absolutely, all these things. So I think one of the, and I haven't heard anybody talking about this in the media, but one of the things I think that we do need to discuss as a result of the Charlie Teo case is, well, how risk averse do we want medical professionals to be? Knowing the more risk averse they are, the more people who will die because they don't get the treatment.
And not just die. I remember at university when we were learning there's mortality rates, but actually what's worse than that is morbidity rates.
Yes, yeah,
right? How
that's
many
right.
people are going to avoid getting a knee surgery or a back surgery or something like that that's actually going to free their life, or a shoulder surgery or maybe any other type of surgery that may it's really crippling them right now, and they're not going to die, but they're gonna live a disabled life for the rest of their lives, or they can have a little bit more of a risky, surgery and actually get a better quality of life at the end. I think that's also, it's not just the mortality rates, but it's the morbidity rates. What do they actually look like as well? I think you're right. Bringing this back onto leaders ourselves, what can we learn from this is, I like your perspective of we need to learn, or we need to figure out what is our level of risk that we want to approach, and therefore set our standards, set our systems and procedures, set our insurance, set the type of clients we accept, set all these things in place to make sure that we accept those things, so that we can play in line with the risks we want to take. But also the other side that I think we could take from this is, we as leaders may be as good as we can be. We may be the best in the world at a particular item. But if we don't have a good bedside manner, if we're not good with interacting with people, that's going to affect our ability to lead. That's going to affect our ability to lead people, lead organizations. We may be the best in the world. I know you know some, I know some people that are the best at the thing that they're doing, but unfortunately they don't have the people skills, and they just churn and burn through leaders, or there's people that are just being used and abused, so to speak. And I know you know of those people. We need to be careful as leaders that we may be the best that we can, but remember, we're not a leader unless we can be good with people as well, because it's a crucial part of leadership is people. Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership podcast. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If it challenged your leadership or inspired you in some way, put a comment below. And if you want to watch the full episode or more content like this, check out our channel. And hey, consider subscribing while you're there.